Hello, this is Shirlene with another episode of the Southern Gal Show. We're going to make some whole wheat rolls today that are really soft and tender. And we're going to use whole wheat flour and I'm going to use some spelt flour. So we will be right back and I hope you'll join us and I think you're going to like this show. To make these rolls, we're going to start with what we call a sponge. And a sponge, especially whole wheat flour, because of the bran in it, and I'm using half whole wheat and half white spelt. White spelt has the bran removed. Still has protein, but it has the bran removed. The whole wheat still has all the bran in it. And whole wheat with the bran, will cut through those gluten strands and keep them from really building to make your fluffier bread. That's one reason I like to use half white spelt with it. But also I like to do a sponge because that will help soften the dough and just get it started sort of fermenting a little bit. And I like to use a sponge a lot of times with bread. So I've got 3 cups, but you know you should use a scale, and I did 390 grams of whole wheat flour. Because when you measure by cups, I've shown that in videos before, my cup of flour and your cup of flour is not going to be the same. And so you can get too much flour in a short time. So 390 grams, a tablespoon and a half of just regular yeast. And I've got 3 cups of warm water here. This is a 4-cup measure. And you want it to be about 100 degrees. You get it too hot, that's 101, 102. You get it too hot, it'll kill your yeast, and you don't want to do that. And too cold, it won't activate the yeast. So it should be warm to the touch, but I like to test it as well. That way I know it's not too hot, not too cold. We're going to mix this up. We're going to let it cover it in plastic wrap and let it set about 30 minutes. Then we'll come back and start making our rolls. This is a really easy recipe. It just, very little time in the kitchen. Most of your time with bread is rising time. That's sort of how that works. But we're just going to make a sponge out of this. Just stir it up and get it mixed together. And once you get your plastic wrap on there, just let it set out. Don't refrigerate it or anything. Just leave it out at room temperature. And it will get kind of bubbly and ferment a little bit. You can leave 20 to 30 minutes. And then I'm actually going to put this into my KitchenAid mixer. You have to have a heavy duty mixer with a dough hook to do bread in a mixer. You can do this by hand. But whole wheat bread takes more kneading. And you have to really, really knead it to do it by hands. I kind of like to use the mixer with it. So this could have been started in a mixer. I just want to show it to you a little better. And I'll move this to the mixer after 30 minutes and we'll start with our bread. It's been actually 30 minutes and look how that rolls up. 20 minutes would have been long enough. Like I said, I'm going to put this in my mixer and then we're going to go on to the next step. So I'm going to add 390 more grams of flour, but this time it's going to be white spelt. I've already got this measured down on my scale, 390 grams. I have about a cup, a little over a cup of just all-purpose flour, AP, wheat flour. You can use this cup extra because you'll probably need it. It can be white spelt, but I'm okay with a little bit of wheat flour in there since I'm using whole wheat anyway. This little bit is not going to upset my stomach or hurt me any. We have a teaspoon and a half of salt we're going to add into our flour. We have 7 tablespoons of oil we're going to add in here. I used olive oil, but you can use whatever kind you want. Put all that in there because you need all that oil goodness. We're going to put in a half a cup of molasses. Now you can use honey. You can use half molasses, half honey. I like the molasses because I like the taste of the molasses in there. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to just turn this on low. On to add my flour. Just a little bit at a time. I like this little spoon scooper. If you got one of those, it works great. Not just use a cup. I already spilled it. Even with that. Turn my mixer up to medium. Move my scale. I don't need to get it all ready. We want all of this 3 cups in there because we're going to add a little bit more. You know, with dough, and you can't see it in here, but you want it to start pulling away from the sides of your bowl. And that's really what we're looking for, is it pulling away from the sides of the bowl. And it's starting to, but it's not mixed in good yet. Do that a little bit better. The dough is starting to, it's mixed up well, but it's still sticking to the sides of the bowl. So we're going to add extra flour, whether you want to use more spelt, white spelt, or all-purpose wheat. I buy the organics, I'm okay with it. And get the unbleached. Don't buy flour if you keep from it that's bleached. It's got chemicals and agents in it that are just not good for you. I avoid those. The rest of that in. And you just put this in, I'm doing a teaspoon at a time, just so we can kind of watch what it's doing. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. When it starts, and it's already starting to pull away from the sides of the bowl, but it's still pretty sticky. It's going to be a little sticky, but we need some of the stickiness out of it. It's a little too sticky. So I'm probably going to end up putting most of this, it's a little over a cup. I'm probably going to put most of it in, but we'll see. You know, it depends on what the environment's like in your kitchen, how much humidity, how much flowers, different flowers on different days, they're just going to react differently, so you just have to be careful with all that. How warm or cold your room is. A lot of factors in bread making. It's starting to get a little thicker. Low, I don't know how well you can see that, but it definitely is pulling away. Okay, I'm going to turn this out onto some parchment. It won't make a floury mess all over my cabinet. We'll see if that'll work for us. I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of flour on there. Again, I'm using my AP because at this point I don't really feel like I have to use white spelt. You can. Actually, these rows are all, we've already got 3 or 4 different people. We're going to take 2 here, 4 there, 3 there. I'm not going to keep hardly any here. But I like to have some, but I don't want too many carbs hanging around my house. So when I make rows for us, I will either freeze them or I'll find people to give them to. I'm going to dip my spoon in here. I'm going to get my dough scraper and dip it in flour. I'm going to pour this out. These things are like about $3 online, but boy, they're worth it. I don't know, you might find them in a store. I don't have a lot of stores around here. This is pretty wet, so I'm going to put a little flour in there and mix it in. But it's going to be sticky when you bring it out, even though you've added that extra flour in there. Wet dough. And flour our hands. Put a little flour on there. Don't overdo the flour. You just have to add it gradually. But you can put some in there because it's obviously too wet still. Put this in the flour. Start rolling it up and just fold. This stage you can just fold. No scraper really gets under there. Put some flour into there. Fold. Fold again. Fold again. Just keep folding until it forms a little bit stiffer dough and not quite as wet. And again, don't overdo the flour. You'll make your bread tough and hard and dry, and it's like biscuits even. You have to be careful with adding too much flour in there. You put what you need and no more than you need. And this folding will really help you see and get underneath there for the wet part. Get a little bit of flour underneath there. Fold this way again. And when it gets folded some where it's not sticking to the parchment so much, we're almost there, then we'll use our parchment to do some folding too. You kneaded it again with our mixer, so we don't have to worry too much about kneading. We may knead it a little bit, but I think we're okay with just our folding here. Works really well. Now, it's starting to stiffen up a little bit. I'm going to put a little flour in my hands. See how it's still sticking to the parchment? It's pretty wet there. We're going to have to get rid of some of that stickiness. You use your parchment, fold it, and fold it until we get it down where it's It's soft dough now, but it's not nearly as wet as it was. It's really more manageable. I can handle it better with my hands. You can wet your hands too, and that really helps you when you're dealing with wet dough. I'm going to do that in a minute. Okay, so now we've got a lot of the stickiness out. I'm okay putting it on the counter and do a little bit of kneading. Now that we got rid of, I just didn't want all that sticky stuff on my counter because it's so hard to clean off. So that's why I use the parchment. So now I am going to put it on the counter. And just knead it a little and see what's going on here. Just knead. Really, you're just folding when you knead. Same thing we were doing with the spatula. You're just folding over. Knead, push a little, fold over, push a little, fold and push, fold and push. You see how it's getting easier to work with now? It's not sticking to the counter. That's what we want to. Right there. It's just about where it needs to be. I really like the little fold method. A little spatula and fold. A little sticky right there. I'm going to grease a bowl. Put the bread in it. Now this is a big batch of dough. So when you make sure your bowl's big enough to let it double. This one's almost not. It will fill it wider here, obviously, than down here. This will pretty much fill this to the top. Okay, we're ready to roll out our rolls, and you can see that this really rolls up. It probably rolls a little too much because I ran to the store and picked up a few things to make some roasted vegetables. So I probably left it a little longer. You really want to, shouldn't rise quite that much, but we're going to go ahead and work with it. I've got a little bit of flour out here, and I've got my scales because I don't like to weigh my rolls out. And my glasses, flour all over them. And I'll take my dough scraper, put a little flour on it, and I'll get this out here. It really helps clean your sides down and comes out really nicely. It's going to be kind of still a wet dough, which is what it should be. To cut my rolls, I'm going to turn this on. Put a little piece of parchment so it doesn't get my scale all dirty. And what we're going to do, sprinkle a little tiny bit of flour on the top so these won't stick to the counter too bad, and a little bit around. We'll take our dough scraper, scrape them up again. You don't want any excess flour, just knock that off. A little too much on there, you don't want that. Scrape it up, pull it up. Sticking to the counter just a tiny bit, so I want to just work it around there so it won't be sticking. We're going to take this dough and divide it. I like to kind of shape it out in kind of an oblong. And I'm going to cut it, flatten it out just a little bit more. And cut it into about 4 long pieces. Just eyeball it right now. Flour on my ditch, on my thing. I mean 3 pieces. You want 3 kind of even pieces. We're going to use the scale to even them up, so it will be alright. Then we're going to cut that in half. 6 pieces now. We're going to cut each of the 6 pieces into 4 pieces. So we're going to make 2 dozen rows, 24 rows. Like I said, I'm giving these away to some people, so we won't have too much. It's the thing I like when I'm making bread. People, a lot of times, don't want to make it, but they sure love to eat it. So they love to have a few rows that you can take to them, and it makes it pretty nice. Again, we're going to divide these out on a scale, but I'll kind of get them apart here. I can tell the ones in the middle are much bigger than the others. We'll fix that with our dividing them up. Put flour down for that so it won't stick. Okay, now I have 2, and these are the bigger pieces in the center. I'm going to take those, and we're going to start dividing. Again, these bigger ones, we'll divide them into 4, but I can assure you some of that will end up being on some of the other rows. So let's work on this. We'll get about 4 here going. Then I'm going to pick up a smaller one because I know it's going to need a little extra dough. And I'm going to cut it, really, since it's small, I'm going to cut it into 3. Then I'll look at this one. It's really big, so I'm going to cut some off of it and put it on some of these smaller ones. And we're going to start weighing these out. And we'll see how much that weighs. 7.4 ounces. That might be about the size we're going to need. So we'll just stick with that size. We'll get them all weighed out. That one's a little big. We'll cut it down a little, and that's really how you work with them. Just a little here, a little there. You can see where the dough needs to go, but you want about 7.4, 7.6, close enough, good enough. And so we just keep weighing these out. Tear it down to 0, 7.6. Now these are not 100% exact because I wasn't that worried with them. I did them from 7.4 to 7.6. You can get them exactly the same if you want to. When you get that dough, take your hands when you get it divided up. If you don't have a scale, just divide it in about 26 pieces as well as you can, or 24 pretty even pieces. If some are smaller and some are bigger, you just have to watch them in the oven and take the smaller ones out maybe a minute or so earlier. Take your dough then, each piece, and flour your hands just a little bit, or wet them. Shake the water off, and then take that dough. I think it's this where you can see it better. And this has just a little flour in here, and you take your hand and you cup it. And you kind of turn the edges under. You want to kind of turn all the edges under first. Then you're going to take it and you're going to shape it up in your hand. Just kind of, see my hand's cupped there. I'm not pushing in, I'm just cupping it. And that really gets it flattened out and nice to a nice round little roll. It's going to actually be a pretty big roll. These are pretty big rolls, even cut into 24. Okay, I'm going to turn that under. You can take it and do this too and just turn it under on 4 corners or 5. Just turn it all under and get it all, about 6 corners actually. Get it all turned under and smooth on the top. Then you take it, cup it in your hand, just cup your hand on it, smooth it on the surface. You don't need flour to do this part, you just need a smooth surface. And when it gets that tension built, then it's going to be a nice shape on the roll. I'll do that when there's a split right there. I'm going to do it just a little more. Get the tension in there. Make them all nice, pretty rolls. We'll do each one, and then we're going to let them rise just maybe 20 minutes or so. This dough is just really rising fast. I said it's pretty warm today. It's nice out. It's rising really fast. So probably 20 minutes they'll puff up, and then we'll be ready to bake them. I've got my oven preheated to 350, and we'll bake them about, I'll start watching them at 20-25 minutes, and then we can go from there if I need to leave them a little longer or take them out a little sooner. You just want them to get kind of golden. You don't want to burn them or anything, but you want them done. The inside should be about 180 and I will check one with a thermometer because you want your bread done on the inside. I like to check mine. Some people don't. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make these and then let them rise a little bit, and then we'll bake them off. I'm going to cover them in plastic wrapper. We'll bake them off. Risen? I have 2 pans. One's on the stove. I'm going to put them both in the oven. You can tell they're puffed up. They look good, and that's, again, these are 26 pretty good sized rolls. So they're not little tiny. If you made them smaller, you could have twice that many. But these are big rolls, and they'll be good though. So we're going to bake them off 350. My oven's preheated. About 25 to 30 minutes. I'm going to start looking at them at about 20 to 25 minutes, and then I'm going to judge from there. Since they're bigger, it might even take a little bit more than 30, and I'm going to check it with my thermometer. And I usually like to cut one open, just see if it's really good and done on the inside. So we'll come back and I'm going to roll this out of the oven, and they smell so good. You can smell that whole wheat and that just smell of fresh bread anyway. And the molasses. I'm going to put them in this container, this bread basket. It's a metal silver-plated bread basket. My mother got me that years and years and years ago, and she's been gone for a long time. But I really still like to use it, so I thought I'd get it out and use it in our show today. 2 pans of rolls, like I said, but I'm going to put one in here right now. And then I'm going to cut one open for you. These probably need to cool a little bit before I put too many in there, but I'm going to put a few in there. Looks really pretty in there. They really are just about perfect. They smell good. They're soft on the outside, just barely starting to get a little crust, but they're still soft. So they'll be soft on the inside. Doesn't that look good? They'll cool in here. They'll be okay because I won't cover them. If you cover them when they're hot, they're of the steam, and I think these would be fine. They look so good. I just wanted you to see them in the pretty basket. Those look so amazing. They just look amazing. I love the smell of fresh bread, but I don't know, I like shaping it and working with it and making it. So I did today. I'm going to cut one of these open. Now I fixed up some butter and softened and molasses in it, since we're working with molasses here. Cut one of these open. They're still pretty hot, so they're pretty soft. I did check them with my thermometer. They were right at 190 to 200, and that's about what you want, about 200 degrees. So that way we know they're done on the inside, and you do want them done. We'll put a little honey butter. These are hot, so they're going to be a little hard to eat. But doesn't that look good? Just real soft on the inside, even soft on the outside. You know, they're a little brown, obviously, but they're still very soft. It's just a really soft, tender inside. Some honey butter on there, and see if I can eat it. Maybe a little too hot right now. Let that melt. The butter's melting on there already. Yum, yum, yum. Okay. Those are soft, tender, really tender whole wheat rolls, even though they're not 100% whole wheat, but they have the white spelt and a little bit of AP in there, which gives them structure. The AP helps with that, and the white spelt has protein, but it doesn't have other nutrients, but the whole wheat has a lot of nutrients in it. These are good. If you want a soft and tender whole wheat roll, big rolls too, actually, you make hamburger buns out of those. But if you want a really soft, tender, really tasty whole wheat roll, try these. Let me know how you like them. And I will see you on the next show.